This seat is for family only. You can eat in the kitchen." That's what my son-in-law said to me at my own Thanksgiving table, in the house I built with these two hands, while my late wife's good china sat steaming in front of every chair but mine. He didn't even look up when he said it. He just kept carving the turkey I had brined for 2 days, like I was the help who'd wandered too far into the dining room. I didn't argue. I've learned that the loudest thing a man can do is go quiet. I set down the gravy boat, looked around that table at 14 faces that weren't mine, and I realized something I should have understood 4 years earlier. This was never going to be fixed with patience. So I smiled, said I wasn't very hungry anyway, and I walked toward the front door. What I did next is the reason I'm telling you this story at all. Before I go on, I genuinely love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your city or your state in the comments. I read every one, and it amazes me how far these stories travel. And I'll say up front, some details here have been changed for privacy and for the sake of telling it clean, but the heart of what happened is real, and the lesson cost me more than I can ever explain. My name doesn't matter much, but folks have called me Wendell for 68 years, so we'll go with that. I spent my whole working life as a structural engineer in a mid-sized firm outside Columbus, Ohio. 41 years of load calculations and soil reports and bridges that are still standing today. I'm telling you that not to brag, but because it matters to what comes later. An engineer learns to look at a thing that seems perfectly solid and ask the only question that counts: where is it going to fail? I built our house in 1986, the year before my daughter was born. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a kitchen with a window over the sink, because my wife wanted to watch the birds while she did the dishes. Her name was Ruth. We were married 39 years before the cancer took her, and the morning she passed, she made me promise one thing. She didn't ask me to be happy. She didn't ask me to move on. She squeezed my hand and she said, "Take care of our girl." So I did. God help me, I tried. Our daughter married a man named Tobias when she was 26. He was handsome in that way that makes you trust him before he's earned it, with a firm handshake and a degree in business development that he mentioned in the first 10 minutes of every conversation. He sold something, software contracts, advertising packages. The specifics shifted depending on who was asking. What he was actually good at, I came to understand, was selling himself. For the first 2 years, they kept their distance, which I now know was the smart play. Then the layoffs came, or so he said. They needed a place to land just for a few months while things stabilized. My daughter looked so tired on my porch that night, holding my grandson on her hip, that I'd have torn the house down before I said no. The boy was 3 then. His name is Caleb, and the first time he fell asleep against my chest in the recliner, I understood why Ruth had made me promise. Some things you'd burn the world down to protect. A few months became a year. A year became 4. And somewhere in there, my house stopped feeling like mine. It started small. Tobias would suggest, real gentle, that maybe I shouldn't be climbing the ladder to clean the gutters at my age. Then it was the car. Better if he handled the maintenance, took it in, dealt with the paperwork, then the mail. He set up something he called a household management system. And one day, I realized my bank statements were coming to me already opened, sorted into a folder on the kitchen counter with little sticky notes in his handwriting. For your records. He framed all of it as kindness, a man helping his aging father-in-law lighten his load. I let it happen. That's the part I still can't forgive myself for. Every time something felt wrong, I'd look at my daughter laughing in the kitchen, at Caleb running circles in the yard I'd mowed for 30 years, and I'd tell myself the price of keeping them close was just swallowing a little pride. I told myself silence was strength. I had it exactly backward. The Thanksgiving it broke open, I'd spent the whole day in the kitchen. I wanted it to be the way Ruth used to do it. The turkey, the cornbread dressing, the green beans with the bacon, the pies cooling on the windowsill where the birds used to come. I came out of that kitchen carrying the gravy, and I found my own dining room full of strangers. Tobias had invited his entire family, his parents, his brother and his brother's wife, cousins I'd never met, already 3 glasses into my wine, tearing into rolls I'd baked that afternoon. 14 people at Ruth's table, and her chair at the head, my chair, the host's chair, had Tobias sitting in it like he'd been born there. That's when he told me to eat in the kitchen. So I walked to the front door, and I opened the electrical panel in the front hall closet. I know that house down to the wiring because I drew the plans myself, and I shut off the main breaker. The whole place went black. I heard a wine glass shatter, heard Tobias's mother yelp, heard him cursing my name in the dark and stumbling into the table I'd built. I pulled on my coat, slipped on my gloves, and stepped out into the cold November night. The door locked behind me with a click that felt like the cleanest sound I'd heard in years. I left them all sitting in the dark with a ruined dinner, and I drove away feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not grief, just quiet. I drove until I hit the highway and pulled into one of those 24-hour diners that smell like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. A waitress who looked as tired as I felt poured me a cup without a word. I wrapped my hands around it just to feel the warmth, and I figured I'd sit there, calm down, and book myself a motel room for the night. Let them stew. We'd talk in the morning like adults, or we wouldn't. I pulled out my phone to check my account and find a room, and that's where the night stopped being about a dinner. I opened my banking app, pressed my thumb to the screen. I scrolled past my checking, down to the savings account I almost never touched. It was labeled in my own handwriting from years back. Caleb, college. There was supposed to be $94,000 in that account. It was the life insurance money from Ruth, every cent of it, the last thing she ever gave this family. I had sworn on her grave I would never spend $1 of it on myself. It was going to send that little boy to college, without a mountain of debt on his back. It was Ruth's final gift to a future she didn't get to see. The screen said the balance was 0. I want you to understand, I didn't panic. I'm an engineer. My first thought wasn't grief. It was the cold, flat certainty that banks do not lose $94,000. I tapped into the transaction history with a hand that, to my surprise, wasn't shaking. There was one line. A wire transfer, 3 days earlier, on the Monday before Thanksgiving, 9:15 in the morning. The entire balance, gone in a single transfer to a title and escrow company 2 counties over. And just like that, sitting in that vinyl booth, I understood the whole thing. The scene at the table wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't drunk family drama. It was a distraction. Tobias had picked a fight loud enough and ugly enough that he was sure I'd spend the holiday weekend too hurt and too rattled to ever open my phone and look. He didn't humiliate me for sport. He did it for cover. He'd robbed me, robbed his own son, and used my dead wife's gift to do it. The eviction from my own table was just the smoke. The fire was somewhere I couldn't see yet. I sat there a long while as the coffee went cold. And I'll be honest with you, the man who'd walked into that diner, the tired old father who just wanted one peaceful holiday, that man didn't walk out. Something in me settled into a place I didn't know I still had access to. Tobias thought he was dealing with a soft, sad widower who'd cry into his coffee and accept it. He had no idea the kind of patience a man builds over 40 years of finding the exact point where a structure breaks. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a cheap motel room staring at the ceiling, and by sunrise I had the shape of it worked out. At 6 in the morning the day after Thanksgiving, I drove downtown to a brick office building I'd actually done the structural retrofit on 20 years back. The brass plate by the door read Holloway and Pierce, attorneys at law. Desmond Holloway had been my closest friend for 43 years. We buried both our wives within 18 months of each other. He's also one of the most feared real estate attorneys in the state, and he opened his office on a holiday Friday because of the voicemail I left him at 3 in the morning. He took one look at my face, handed me a coffee, and didn't say a word about the holiday. We sat in his conference room, and I laid it out the way I'd report a bridge failure. No tears, no rambling, just the facts in order. The empty account, the wire transfer, the escrow company, Ruth's money, Caleb's future. Desmond listened without interrupting once, and I watched my old friend disappear and the attorney take his place. His shoulders squared, his jaw set. When I finished, he tapped his finger on the table a few times and said the thing I hadn't let myself think. A bank does not wire $94,000 on somebody's say-so. There had to be a legal instrument already in place, something that made Tobias, in the eyes of the bank, into me. He pulled his keyboard close and logged into the county recorder's database, typed in my name, my address, the last 90 days of filings. The search wheel spun, and then a list populated. Most of it was old and harmless, the original deed, the mortgage payoff I'd filed a decade ago. But at the top, flagged new, was a document filed 16 days earlier. A Monday. I remembered that Monday because Tobias had insisted on taking my truck to get the oil changed, which left me stranded at home for half a day. The perfect window. Desmond opened it, and the words at the top of that scanned page made my stomach drop. Durable power of attorney. He read the clauses out loud, and each one was worse than the last. It gave Tobias total control over my accounts, my property, my medical decisions. It made him my legal proxy in every way that mattered. To the bank, to the county, to the whole system. His signature was my signature. And then Desmond scrolled to the last page, to the signature line, and there was my name. A near-perfect forgery of my own handwriting, every loop, every slant, even the way I dragged the tail on the final letter. He'd practiced. He'd sat in my house and practiced signing my name until he could do it cold, but underneath it was a notary stamp, and Desmond went very still when he saw the name on it. He knew that notary, a man he'd helped get investigated years back, operating out of the back office of a failing used car lot on the south side. Tobias hadn't just forged my name. He'd paid a crooked official to make the forgery look bulletproof. This wasn't a desperate man grabbing some cash. This was a plan. He'd been building it for weeks, passing me the salt at breakfast while he plotted to strip me of everything. Desmond didn't stop. He traced the escrow company that got Ruth's money. Turned out to be a high-end firm that handles million-dollar deals downtown. Then he logged into a database lawyers use to track pending property transfers before they go public, and he cross-referenced it against Tobias's name. One listing came up, a luxury condo in the tallest glass tower in the city, marble counters, a balcony over the whole skyline, the kind of place a hedge fund kid buys to impress people. The listing price was $1.3 million. The broker's private notes confirmed an earnest money deposit of $94,000 received that Monday morning, securing the unit. Buyer of record Tobias. He'd taken my dead wife's gift and put it down on a penthouse. But $94,000 is pocket change against $1.3 million. He needed the rest in cash, and fast. So Desmond pulled up the tax and deed records for my house, the house I built in 1986, and a red banner stretched across the top of the file. Pending sale. He opened the contract. My home. Ruth's kitchen windows, a porch, the spot in the yard where I taught Caleb to swing a bat, was being sold to a development company that buys old houses, levels them, and throws up high-density rentals. The price was $800,000, all cash. The seller of record, using that forged power of attorney to bypass me entirely, was Tobias. He was going to sell my house, take the $800,000, close on his penthouse, and leave me homeless. The closing date on the contract was December 1st. We were sitting there on the 29th of November. We had 2 days. Desmond was already reaching for his coat. He wanted to drive straight to the police and his old friend in the financial crimes unit, get Tobias arrested before the banks opened Monday. And I told him to sit down. I explained it the way I'd explain why a beam that looks fine is actually going to buckle. If we went to the local police right now, Tobias walks. He's a clean-cut man with no record and a good suit. He hires a slick lawyer, claims it's all a big family misunderstanding, swears I signed the power of attorney months ago, and forgot because I'm getting old. And the worst part, my own daughter would probably stand up and back him, because she'd already decided her marriage was worth more than my dignity. A county prosecutor looks at that mess and offers a plea. Probation, a little community service, and Tobias is back in my house by spring, smiling, waiting for the next opening. I'd be the confused old man who cried wolf. I didn't want him slapped on the wrist. I wanted him to walk all the way into a trap he could never climb out of. The The moment he authorized that $800,000 transfer across state lines using a forged document, the crime stopped being a local forgery and became federal wire fraud. I didn't want county cops at his door. I wanted the FBI. I wanted a number of years that starts with a 1 and ends with a 0. Desmond lowered his coat real slow and looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he sat back down, and the friend was gone and the surgeon was back. He understood exactly what I was building. We weren't playing defense anymore. We were engineering a collapse, and we were going to let Tobias stand right in the middle of it when it came down. First thing Desmond did was draft a revocation of power of attorney, watertight, notarized, filed directly into the state registry through the expedited portal that lawyers and judges use. The beauty of it, and this is the part that still makes me smile, is that a revocation doesn't require the other party to sign it or even know about it. The instant it filed, that forged power of attorney was a dead piece of paper, but Tobias would get no notice. He'd walk into that title company on closing day believing he held the keys to a kingdom, and he'd actually be holding nothing but a felony. Then I went home and did the hardest acting of my life. I had to be the broken old man. I had to let them believe the plan was working so nobody got nervous and changed the timeline. When I walked in that night, Tobias was waiting in the hall. No audience this time, just the two of us. He stepped into my space, jabbed a finger at my chest, and told me my little stunt with the power had ruined his mother's holiday and embarrassed him in front of his whole family. I said nothing, which only wound him tighter. Then he leaned in and dropped his voice to a whisper and told me that if I ever pulled something like that again, he'd make one phone call and have me declared incompetent. He said he'd already found a place, a low-income state facility 2 towns over, the kind where they lock the doors from the outside. He described it in detail, watching my face, hoping I'd break so he could document that I was unstable. I just looked past his shoulder, down the hall, where the door to the garage stood open. The light was on, and against the back wall were cardboard boxes, a dozen of them, half taped shut. I saw my own handwriting on a blue bin, Ruth's Porcelain. He wasn't just planning to sell the house on December 1st. He was already boxing up my entire life to throw it in a storage unit or a dumpster the moment that money cleared. So I gave him a tired, beaten little nod, played the part exactly, and let him think he'd won. He smirked and let me pass. In the kitchen, my daughter caught my arm. Her eyes were red and swollen, and for half a second I let myself hope. She begged me, whispering, to just do whatever Tobias wanted, to stop fighting, to stop making trouble. She said he was about to close on a deal that would finally fix everything, save their marriage, secure their future. And in that moment, the last piece of my hope turned to ash. She knew. Not the forgery, maybe, not the stolen money. But she knew her husband was making some enormous move with my assets, and she'd decided my home and my security were a fair price to keep him from leaving her. She was asking me to walk quietly into my own ruin so she could keep pretending. I pulled my arm back, gentle, and I looked at the girl I'd raised, the girl Ruth made me promise to protect, and I felt nothing but a hollow cold. She'd chosen her side. It was over the next 2 days that the worst of it came out. I'd hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Solly, with cash from a separate account Tobias never knew about. He met me in the dark parking garage and handed me a folder, and he told me to brace myself. The photos weren't of Tobias planning a home for his wife and son. They were of him with a young woman, maybe 24, blonde in expensive clothes, his arm around her waist in the marble lobby of that glass tower. The two of them at dinner at a furniture store ordering tens of thousands of dollars of pieces delivered to the penthouse. Sully had pulled the building's key fob registry. Tobias had registered 2 fobs for that condo. One for himself, one for her, none for my daughter, none for my daughter, none for Caleb. The plan wasn't to move his family into a better life. The plan was to steal everything, vanish into that tower with his girlfriend, and leave my daughter and my grandson standing in the snow with nothing but debt. He was going to let them bulldoze my house with me inside it, figuratively speaking, and abandon his own son in the same breath. I'll tell you, that's when whatever was left of my mercy died. Not for me. For Caleb. That little boy didn't ask for any of this. I held all of it, the photos, the revocation, the truth, and I waited. Because if I detonated early, Tobias would panic, cancel the sale, hide the money offshore, and slip away with nothing but a forgery charge that goes nowhere. I had to let him pull the trigger himself. I had to stand in my house, look that man in the eye every morning, and say nothing. Quick favor before I finish. If you're still with me, drop the number 7 in the comments so I know you made it this far. It means more than you'd think. December 1st came cold and gray. Tobias came down that morning in a brand new navy suit, silk tie, shoes that clicked on Ruth's floors. He'd bought it all on credit against money he was sure he'd have by noon. He told me to have my boxes by the front door when he got home, because the transport van for the facility was coming the next day. He used Caleb as the final knife, said if I made any trouble, I'd never see my grandson again. My daughter came down in her robe, threw her arms around his neck, kissed him, told him how proud she was of how hard he was working for their family. I sat at the counter and watched her praise the man who'd registered a key fob for his mistress and none for her. He told her he loved her, walked out the door, and drove off to claim his fortune. I waited 10 minutes. Then I got my coat, took the locked briefcase with the revocation and the photos, and I drove downtown to the bank. Desmond was already on the steps. We went straight up to the senior branch manager, a sharp woman named Odette, who knew Desmond from a dozen old cases. He laid it out: active elder financial exploitation, an impending federal wire fraud, a forged power of attorney. He demanded an immediate hard freeze on every account, every routing number, every line of credit tied to my Social Security number. She warned me what a total freeze meant. I'd lock myself out of my own money. Pending payments would bounce. I told her to seal every vault and burn every bridge, that I didn't care if I couldn't buy a cup of coffee for a month. She entered the override, and a red banner flashed across her screen, my whole financial identity locked down under a fraud mandate. Then I handed her the state-certified revocation. She read it, saw the confirmation number and Desmond's notary seal, and the color left her face when she understood what was happening in real time. A forged document being used right now, this morning, to sell a man's house out from under him. She got the regional fraud division on the phone, read them my numbers and the escrow routing details, flagged the account. The federal machinery started turning, and its gears closed around Tobias's throat without him feeling a thing. Across town, in a glass conference room, he was signing. I could picture it, the developers across the table, the escrow officer sliding the closing documents over, the gold pen in his hand. He signed his forged name to my house without a flicker of guilt. The developer shook his hand. The escrow officer turned to her terminal, typed in the routing numbers, authorized $800,000 in cash, and pressed send. The money shot out into the banking system, racing toward the wall we'd built. At 9:30, a chime went off on Odette's monitor. The wire hit Tobias's escrow account, a block of green text, $800,000 incoming. And the instant it tried to clear the final automated checkpoint, it slammed into the freeze. The green turned red. A box filled the screen. Transaction denied. Account suspended. The money was caught, frozen, confiscated by the fraud division. Because the wire had crossed state lines before it was blocked, because it involved a forged instrument and a stolen identity and a sum way over the federal threshold, the system kicked it straight to the FBI. Odette confirmed it quietly. Federal agents and local detectives were already getting the alert, with the location of the signing and Tobias's name on it. He'd completed the crime. He'd signed. There was no taking it back, no calling it a misunderstanding. He was locked into it. I pictured him walking out of that tower into the cold, feeling like a king, reaching for his keys. Then his phone ringing. Not the developers, not his girlfriend, but his frantic real estate agent screaming that his deposit check had bounced for fraud, that the condo was back on the market, and the 2 police officers were standing in the lobby asking where he was. I pictured the exact moment his whole face fell. They arrested him that afternoon in that suit, in the marble lobby he'd already decorated in his head. What came after took months, and I won't pretend it was clean or painless. The forged power of attorney unraveled fast once the FBI pulled the crooked notary in. The man rolled on Tobias inside a week to save himself. Ruth's $94,000 was recovered from the escrow hold and put right back where it belonged, in Caleb's account where it's going to stay. The house sale was voided. My home was still mine. Tobias took a plea in the end: federal wire fraud, identity theft, exploitation of an elder. The number of years starts with a 1. He won't be a young man when he comes out, and he'll come out to nothing. My daughter is the part that doesn't have a clean ending. When the truth came out, all of it, the girlfriend, the key fob, the plan to leave her with the debt, something in her finally broke loose from him. She came to me crying, said she was sorry, said she didn't know about the girl. Maybe that part's true. But I'll be honest with you. The way only an old man telling a story has any business being. I didn't run to forgive her. She knew enough. She begged me to surrender my home so her husband could rob me, and she did it to protect a lie. That's not nothing. We talk now, carefully, like two people learning a new language. It may get better. It may not. I'm too old to promise either of us that it will. But Caleb. That boy is with me most weekends now. He's 7, and he's learning to fish in the creek behind the house, the same creek I learned in. His college money is safe, and when he falls asleep against my chest in that same recliner, I keep my promise to Ruth all over again. Take care of our girl. I'm trying, and I'm taking care of her boy. I sit at the head of Ruth's table now, in my own chair, in the quiet. No strangers. No one telling me to eat in the kitchen. Some nights the quiet feels lonely. I won't lie to you. But it's mine, and it's honest, and I'll take an honest loneliness over a comfortable lie every single time. Here's what I'd leave you with, whoever you are, wherever you're listening from. I spent 4 years calling my silence patience, my fear peace, my surrender love. It wasn't any of those things. Kindness without a boundary isn't kindness. It's an open door for the kind of person who's looking for one. If someone you love turns that love into a weapon and points it at you, you are allowed to step back and see them clearly, even if they share your blood, even if you held them as a baby. Especially then. Ask the questions early. Protect what's yours, not out of greed, but because the people depending on you can't protect it themselves. And don't ever trade your dignity for the illusion of peace. I almost did. It nearly cost me everything Ruth and I ever built. If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll think of one person in your own life you've been too proud or too tired to set a boundary with, and I hope you set it before you're sitting in a cold diner at midnight, learning the hard way like I did. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what you'd have done in my place. I read everyone. Take care of yourselves out there and hold the good ones close.